Thank you, Councillor Paquette.
And
I'm a yes.
I'm a yes as well.
And Councillor Tang's a yes.
Yes as well.
Councillor Salvador is yes.
Thank you, Councillor Tang.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. We have all the votes.
Please display the votes. And that is carried. And now we will move to the approval of the minutes. There's none. Protocol items, none. And then we will now select items for debate, as these are all orientation items, and not only do we benefit, but the public benefits from hearing them. I'll just proactively select them all. So there's no reports not selected for debate. We have request to speak, none. And then we do have a request for time specific on the agenda. There's already some time specifics, but there's because we just added 7.5, there's now a request for time specific. Would any of my colleagues in chamber like to move that?
So moved. Second.
Could you read that in for the record?
Sure.
Please?
I move that Council Orientation Corporate Focus Area Growth Planning, second item of business on Tuesday, November 25th, 2025.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Wright, I believe I heard. Okay, please vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Councillor Stevenson is yes. Councillor Tang is a yes.
Thank you, Councillor Tang.
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Councillor Salvador is also yes.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador. Councillor Paquette.
I'm a yes as well.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. And I believe Councillor Rutherford, you were a yes, correct? Thank you. And Councillor Stevenson and Councillor Clark. Sorry, I missed.
Yes, I'm a yes.
Thank you, Councillor
Councillor Clark is yes.
Thank you. We have all the votes.
Please display the votes. And that is carried. Perfect. And we, just going through this quickly, we have no requests for time specific on the agenda, no bylaws. Are there any council inquiries that may have been submitted to the chair that I might not be aware of? Okay. See none. We can move on. There are no item 4, 5, and 6 have no items, so we will move on to 7.1, our first item of business on Monday, November 24th, the orientation on financial sustainability, one I know many are keen to hear about. So I'll hand it over to administration.
Thank you. Good morning. I just hit all my slides the wrong way. Last week we laid the foundation for City Council by presenting the fundamentals of budgeting and financial administration. In that presentation, we discussed the foundational elements for how budgeting and financial planning works. This included legal requirements, policies, and principles that govern how we build the city's capital and operating budgets. We also provided an overview of our funding sources, for example, revenues for our capital and operating budgets, and financial resources are allocated to various municipal services. Today, we move from the fundamentals to the financial future of our city by presenting our second corporate focus area of supporting our financial sustainability. Next slide. After a brief review of our core financial frameworks and processes, we will dive deeper into the fiscal challenges the city is currently facing, identifying the impacts of to the corporation, and presenting administration's comprehensive plan of actions to address structural issues. We will also highlight key initiatives designed for to seamlessly integrate our operating and capital budgets so that the infrastructure inventory is financially sustainable in the long term. Ultimately, our goals are to equip council with clear strategic information and context needed to secure comprehensive understanding of our financial position, as well as providing clarity on administration's plan of action towards financial sustainability, and to define the collaborative partnership requirement to implement and sustain our fiscal strategy. Next slide. Financial sustainability is one of our 5 core focus areas and is inherently linked to all others. Just as you've heard during the engagements with constituents, whether from residents, business owners, or industry leaders, we also recognize the importance of financial sustainability and how the concept manifests itself through property taxes and affordability, the perception of value for money of citizens or of city services, inflation, and the long-term financial stability of our organization. Supporting financial sustainability will provide benefits to Edmontonians by providing greater transparency and accountability, ensuring resources are allocated to priorities most important to Edmontonians, building confidence that the city is fiscally resilient, and preparing for potential economic changes. For the organization, this focus area will support us in establishing an accountability framework for priority setting and decision making, driving operational excellence through efficient use of resources and monitoring against strategic targets, providing the financial oversight required to ensure balanced budgets and strong credit rating. Next slide. Before proceeding, let's briefly reiterate the distinct roles in financial administration. City Council focuses on the strategic rules and limits from a governance perspective. The role of Council is to set strategic direction, approve policy and funding frameworks, focus on long-term fiscal planning. Administration takes a direct operational perspective, focusing on execution and stewardship. We must execute the strategic direction, manage performance and reporting, deliver active financial stewardship, and ensure operational efficiency and risk management. Working together, Council and Administration will achieve 4 common objectives: strengthening long-term fiscal sustainability, aligning financial resources and strategic priorities, delivering efficient and accountable services, and balancing renewal and growth investments. Next slide. Financial sustainability means ensuring that the city can meet both its current and future service needs without unfairly burdening the next generation. We focus on 2 key outcomes. Number 1 is about achieving a stable, predictable financial position to absorb any unexpected shocks like downturns or disasters without cutting essential services. Services managed efficiently deliver all the city services within the annual budgets by maintaining discipline and spending. Cost performance measured. We don't just track spending. We measure the efficiency and effectiveness of services. We benchmark against peer cities to ensure the best value for taxpayer money. And outcome number 2 is about ensuring that critical infrastructure is in good condition and can sustainably support the growing population. And in there, we're balanced funding. That's where balanced funding and renewal and growth. We balance funding for renewal and growth. Our 4-year capital plan ensures that we consistently fund the renewal, maintenance, and replacement of existing assets, not just new growth. Reliable service, proactively managing asset condition, roads, facilities, parks, prevents costly emergencies and ensures service reliability. And then total cost of ownership, which with investment decisions consider the full total cost of ownership, operating, maintenance, and replacement, not just upfront costs, construction costs, preventing expensive liabilities in the future. Now I'll pass it over to Stacey, who's going to walk you through this focus area.
You can go to the next slide, please. Edmonton's financial sustainability framework is designed to build a stable and lasting financial foundation for the city. Our primary goal is to solidify the city's financial position today, to provide financial independence and leave a strong legacy for future generations. City Council approved this framework in early 2025. It is grounded in 5 foundational elements and 5 foundational principles that are critical for achieving and maintaining financial sustainability. The 5 foundational elements necessary to achieve and maintain financial sustainability involve judiciously stewarding all city assets. This means being a responsible manager of all city assets, infrastructure, technology, and financial investments. We balance new needs with maintaining existing assets, use data to improve services and reduce future costs, and seek prudent returns on investments. Responsibly and prudently managing financial resources. By maintaining a structurally balanced budget where day-to-day revenues meet or exceed expenses, this includes having adequate liquid assets, maintaining financial reserves in order to manage risk, and using debt strategically within the legislative guidelines. The third element is ensuring that the city has necessary financial capacity to meet objectives, ensuring that the city can generate sufficient revenue to serve residents. This is achieved by maintaining a balanced tax base and using a diverse mix of revenue sources, user fees, and smart taxation policies. The fourth element is making decisions for today that do not compromise the future, applying foresight by using full costing for new services and projects, which accounts for ongoing financial implications, not just the initial costs. This avoids creating infrastructure debt for future generations and ensures sustainability. And the final element is aligning the day-to-day business operations with long-term strategic goals, connecting everything we do to the big picture. We prioritize services and projects to achieve the highest number of strategic objectives, funding core services across the city first before allocating resources for enhancements. Within this financial sustainability framework, 5 principles underpin all financial activities and decision-making at the city. First of all, transparency. All financial decisions and reports are clear, accessible, and easy for everyone to understand. This builds trust by providing a complete picture of how public funds are managed. The second, public affordability. A central consideration ensuring services and tax burdens are reasonable and sustainable. We manage costs to run the city efficiently without undue burden on Edmontonians. The third, value for money. Maximizing public benefit from every dollar spent through smart, strategic, and efficient resource allocation. Every expenditure must deliver a real, tangible benefit. Strategic alignment. This ensures that departments work cohesively towards the corporation's shared financial strategies with long-term vision and defined financial constraints, and within defined financial constraints. And the final one is intergenerational equity, making financial decisions today that distribute resources and costs fairly across time. We manage finances to ensure that future residents inherit a financially healthy and thriving city. In summary, these elements and principles are core to our financial sustainability framework. They define how we will manage the city's finances responsibly, effectively, and with a vision to the future. Next slide, please. You've seen this before. This diagram illustrates our integrated process for strategic planning and budgeting. This structure is important to the city's financial sustainability because it enforces the fiscal discipline and long-term predictability by moving away from reactive year-to-year budgeting to multi-year budgeting. Next slide, please, and the next. The Municipal Government Act, or MGA, requires a balanced operating budget. This requirement is essential for long-term financial sustainability by requiring the discipline to ensure that sufficient revenues are collected to pay for the operations of a municipality. To meet the balanced budget requirement, a municipality's revenue sources, which include property taxes, user fees, and grants, must be forecast to meet the estimated costs of service delivery. If estimated expenditures exceed revenues, then council must either increase revenues, so either raise property taxes or increase user fees, decrease expenditures by reducing service levels or funding internal savings, or transfer funds from reserve, which are often one-time savings set aside from prior years. There are 2 key approaches to building a budget. On the left, we see an approach that starts by defining the desired service level, then determining the necessary resources, that is the people, time, and equipment, required to arrive at a corresponding budget. On the right, we begin with available budget. From there, we evaluate the service that can be delivered with the people, time, and equipment that fit within that budget. In our current economic environment, with limited resources and concerns around affordability, defining our service levels based on the budget available will help us prioritize choices in a budget that will maintain financial sustainability. Next slide, please. This familiar visual shows you the 4 ways our service levels and budgets interact. We have all 4 of these scenarios across our organization today. We identify these issues primarily through our financial reporting. As budgets are estimates of revenues and expenses, variances are expected. However, recurring and unaddressed unfavorable variances can erode the financial sustainability of an organization. Structural budget variances are recurring deficits or surpluses that can be attributed to an event or a circumstance that fundamentally changed the business operations. When a budget gap or surplus becomes recurring, we call it a structural budget variance. It can happen where a fundamental change has occurred, like shifts in commuter behavior impacting revenue, and that fundamental change requires a long-term fix, not just a quick adjustment. Our goal is simple, but it's not easy. Eliminate the misalignment and maximize the strategic opportunities. We're actively bringing in many tools to help us identify and correct these variances faster. This is about being strategic. We must capture the opportunities where we can reallocate funds from services delivered below budget or reduce unnecessarily high standards. We must address budget pressures, and we must continue to innovate and continually improve our service delivery. We're improving our planning through documents like the capital and operating investment outlook reports and refining our processes around capturing things like total cost of ownership. This helps us plan for growth effectively and avoid creating future budget issues. Ultimately, this work is paving the way for our major shift to results-based budgeting. This ensures that every tax dollar is explicitly aligned to our service level targets, moving us from reacting to variances to proactively building a structurally sound and successful budget. Addressing structural budget variances where service levels exceed the budget. This can happen in situations where approved service levels lack the corresponding budget increases, but those service levels are maintained rather than eroding the service levels. It also can occur when service levels are maintained for growing demand without budgetary increases, and it can occur when fee changes don't keep pace with inflationary increases. It can also occur when committed budget reductions or savings are reversed without returning funding, or where those savings are not implemented or achieved. Over the past decade, the city has been through a number of budget reduction exercises. Since 2015, these efforts have resulted in a cumulative savings of $1.9 billion. But as the city grows and Edmontonians' needs change, it can still be challenging to achieve a balanced budget while continuing to provide the services that people rely on. Next slide. The Municipal Government Act requires the city to have a balanced budget, meaning we're not permitted to budget for deficits or use debt to fund our operating costs. Budget variances are funded by the Financial Stabilization Reserve, which is a one-time funding source. If we don't solve for the things that gave rise to a negative budget variances can turn into structural budget variances. Using the FSR to fund ongoing structural budget variances can quickly become unsustainable. This practice depletes the FSR, eliminating financial flexibility to deal with future emergent issues or to strategically advance the organization. Ultimately, we need to find real, sustainable solutions to any of our structural budget variances. Solving these issues permanently requires difficult decisions, as each solution comes with its own challenges. And in general, the options include increasing user fees and taxes, where we need to consider tax tolerance and affordability for Edmontonians and local businesses, or reducing service levels, where we need to consider the potential impacts to our staff and Edmontonians for all the services that we provide. We've talked about the Financial Stabilization Reserve a few times. It's a critical financial instrument for the city, primarily designed to mitigate the impact of unforeseen one-time expenditures and to offset potential deficits within the tax-supported budget. It helps the city ensure the city's continued financial sustainability and resilience against unexpected fiscal challenges. The FSR has really only one funding source, and that is any annual tax-supported surplus. In years where we have surpluses, that surplus increases the FSR balance. In years where we have a tax-supported deficit, because all of our expenditures need to be funded as a municipality, those unfunded expenditures are ultimately paid for from the FSR, therefore reducing the balance of the FSR. It's okay to use the FSR to fund tax-supported deficits from time to time. In fact, that's partially what it's designed for. In the last 17 years, we've had tax-supported deficits only 4 times, and each time the FSR has been reduced to address those deficits. Recurring deficits, however, can create challenges, which is why resolving structural budget variances is so important. The FSR is a cornerstone of the city's financial policies. It plays a pivotal role in guaranteeing our long-term financial sustainability. Think of it like your savings account. It's necessary to deal with emerging and one-time expenses, but if you spend more than you earn consistently, the savings will deplete fast. The FSR ensures that the city can respond to emergencies and absorb unanticipated one-time costs without jeopardizing essential public services or resorting to immediate tax increases. It also helps us navigate economic fluctuations by providing us with some time to adjust our budgets. And as I mentioned, in recent years, the FSR has been drawn upon to cover structural budget variances, which over time erodes the amount of funding available in the reserve. Addressing these structural budget imbalances is paramount to restoring the FSR to its optimal level and safeguarding the city's financial future. This graph illustrates the impact of structural budget variances on the FSR. The FSR has a target and a minimum balance established by policy and best practice. We establish these based on a risk-based review of our financial exposures for the city. Maintaining the minimum balance and replenishing the balance is necessary to ensure that we can address emerging items and risks. The red line on this graph represents the target balance. The blue line represents the minimum balance, and the green line is the balance of the FSR. You can see since 2021, the balance has fluctuated and is currently below the required minimum balance. This slide visually represents what would happen if we don't address the structural budget issues we've identified. Yellow represents the FSR shortfall, or the dollar amount required to reach the minimum FSR balance. Currently, this is projected at $64.5 million before we factor in the projected surplus for 2025. You can see this amount in the 2025 column. In year 2, we're projecting, so if we land with a $15.7 million surplus, which we're projecting, and we assume that all of that goes to the FSR, which is actually unlikely because we consider carry forwards, this would reduce the FSR shortfall that you see in the yellow. But if we then added the unresolved structural budget variances, estimated at $52.3 million, you can see how we get further away from the minimum balance of the FSR. If we don't address these structural budget variances, as we move into year 3 and year 4, you can see that the shortfall compounds each year. While one-time strategies can help us restore the FSR, we actually have to find ongoing solutions to these persistent structural budget variances in order to truly solve the problem. Next slide, please. As of quarter 3, 2025, the FSR is projected to be at $78.4 million, which is well below its minimum balance of $142.9 million. When the FSR dipped below its minimum balance, we were required through the policy to develop a strategy to bring the reserve back up to its minimum balance within 3 years. Administration conducted a budget exercise to identify $10 million in one-time savings, but more funding is required to bring the balance back to the minimum. Council ultimately approved tax increases and an exception to the policy in order to replenish the FSR over a longer period of time. In order for this repayment strategy to work, we cannot continue to draw from the financial stabilization reserve, so again, resolving any structural budget variances will be important. If we continue to run deficits, the problem becomes larger, and we'll ultimately end up with additional tax levy increases, less flexibility to address one-time budget pressures, and less funding towards the dedicated renewal fund, which would mean less funding for capital renewal in the next budget cycle. Next slide, and the next one. The initial structural budget variances identified in 2024 totaled $88.1 million. We're making progress, and funding reallocations have helped to address some variances. Through various actions, this amount has since been reduced to $52.3 million. For each structural budget variance, there are action plans in place that outline the steps and the timeline for finding a solution to the issues. In many cases, budget remedies are not immediate. The focus is on aligning actual expenditures with the budget once solutions are implemented. Administration has been taking various steps to address budget variances, including initiating program reviews, examining the cost of delivering services, exploring revenue increases, and examining service delivery options. While many of these issues are complex and may take years to fully resolve, we're addressing the more immediate structural budget variances as part of the fall SOBA in order to have a cleaner starting point for the 2027 to 2030 budget. This may involve making tough choices about service levels and budget. Select action plans that propose service level reductions will be presented as unfunded service packages in the fall SOBA, allowing council to decide whether to reduce service levels or adjust the tax levy. If left unfunded, the action plan will be implemented and the service levels will be reduced. It's important to note that even if funding is provided to align budget to service levels, this doesn't necessarily solve the root cause of a structural budget variances. Action plans must still be executed to address the budget pressure and to keep it from increasing further. An update of all structural budget variances is included as part of the fall supplementary operating budget adjustment. A key component of the first financial sustainability outcome, strong fiscal governance enables a resilient financial position, is ensuring that costs and performance are consistently measured and benchmarked. We're shifting to a results-based planning and budgeting approach, which will help us enable and determine if our collective efforts are making measurable impacts. Results-based budgeting is fundamentally defined as the systemic use of performance information to inform budget decisions, either as a direct input to budget allocation decisions or as contextual information to inform budget planning. This entails using data on outputs, outcomes, and efficiency to make decisions about resource allocation. It's a mechanism that connects the program service investments with their achieved outcomes and outputs, leveraging formal performance information for allocating resources. The goal is to ensure that public funds are directed towards initiatives that deliver the greatest value and impact. We already have the puzzle pieces. It's now a matter of connecting and maturing them. Once we've done this, we'll be able to describe our strategic goals and the resources the city uses for its programs and services, present both financial and non-financial performance information that demonstrates the standards to which city programs and services are delivered, and produce comparative analysis and reports from one period to another. The city's enterprise performance management system is governed by Council's enterprise performance management policy, which directs administration to measure and transparently report on progress on results that matter to Edmontonians and Council. The EPM system is a foundation of results-based budgeting, which will allow Council to understand how well our resources are distributed among competing initiatives and services, ensuring they align with the strategic priorities and outcomes while helping to deliver outputs and services at the lowest possible cost. Council will receive performance reports on performance indicators for outcomes as well as performance measures for outputs, the corporate actions, initiatives, and services that we deliver. Internally, we will oversee and monitor the effective use and deployment of resources, the people, budget, time, and equipment that are used to deliver and those corporate actions, initiatives, and services. At the October 9th, 2024 Executive Committee meeting, administration presented the capital and operating shortfall analysis. We refer to this report as the fiscal gap report. I'll take a moment to highlight some of the key aspects of this report. While the city of Edmonton is in stable financial condition, the city's financial challenges are immense. There are systematic underlying challenges that threaten the city's long-term financial sustainability. On both an operating and capital basis, the city's revenue-raising capacity persistently falls short of its expenditure needs. This difference between our revenue capacity and our expenditure needs is defined in the report as the fiscal gap. Though it would be simpler to categorize the cause of the fiscal gap as solely a revenue problem or a spending problem, the reality is that it's both and more. The fiscal gap is multifaceted and compounded by numerous issues relating to city spending levels, the variety of the services offered, service levels, grant funding, our own source revenues and the ability to collect revenues, the city's strategic goals, and its infrastructure assets and its tax base. Some contributing factors to the fiscal gap are outside of the city's control, caused by shifts in social, economic, and environmental factors, or by decisions or actions of higher order governments. However, many of the other contributing factors are within the city's control to influence. The report identified areas where the city must focus its efforts and where it has control to influence the size of the fiscal gap. There are many contributing factors to this city's fiscal gap, and I'll just highlight a few of them on the next slides. The report highlighted tax-based pressures. So I'm just going to highlight the non-res-based growth issues, but I'll keep it brief, since you're going to hear more about this in the coming weeks. This is a complex and foundational topic to the city's fiscal sustainability. We presented this to Executive Committee on June 19th last year, and additional details can be found in sections 16 and 17 of the Fiscal Gap Report. Over the 15-year period from 2008 to 2023, Edmonton's non-residential assessment value as a share of total metropolitan non-residential assessment value declined quite rapidly, from 72% to 59%. And so while non-residential assessment is growing in Edmonton, our proportionate share is declining. Analysis indicates that this is in large part due to non-residential real growth occurring disproportionately in the municipalities outside of Edmonton's boundaries. Real growth refers to newly constructed properties and improvements to existing properties, and is a measure of how much new construction value is added to the tax base each year. There was an estimated $29.9 billion in non-residential growth from 2010 to 2022 across metropolitan Edmonton, of which the city absorbed only 41%, whereas other surrounding municipalities absorbed 59%. The ideal growth rate absorption should be somewhat proximate to the city's population share, which is 72.8%, as population ultimately drives the city's expenditure responsibilities. Every fiscal decision the city makes in relation to spending and taxation needs to be mindful of the non-residential tax-based context. If the city overextends its spending, it drives tax levy growth, which magnifies the difference between our non-residential tax rates and the rates of neighboring municipalities. Failing to capture a sufficient share of non-residential growth will impair the city's fiscal sustainability, reducing its capacity for maintaining services and infrastructure. Despite a sense of competition, a weakened Edmonton would weaken the entire metropolitan region. We're also seeing an increased reliance on property tax to fund the city's operations. We can see since 2000, property tax has grown as a share of operating revenues from 46% to 59%, whereas non-tax revenues have declined from 54% to 41%. Some non-tax revenue streams are outside of the city's control. However, other streams are within the city's control to influence, and these streams haven't always been adequately protected. For example, two of the city's prominent user fee revenue streams, transit and recreation, haven't always kept pace. In general, all governments need their revenues to grow in line with economic growth, or they won't be able to keep pace with the cost of delivering public services. Insufficient adjustments to items like user fees has put additional pressure on the tax levy. The city does not have the fiscal capacity to provide these services as fully tax-supported services, and a failure to grow user fee revenues will compromise service levels and diminish the overall quality of service for Edmontonians. The high emphasis on growth capital from all three orders of government, including the city, coupled with provincial reductions on unconstrained transfer funding, has produced a large renewal gap. Over the 2023 to 2026 cycle, the city's ideal renewal gap is in the order of $3.6 billion, of which only 57.5% is funded in the current budget cycle. This gap will cause a deterioration in the condition of city assets. Not addressing the renewal will create upward pressure on the tax levy as maintenance costs will rise. Based on the available funding, this gap is projected to grow in the 2027 to 2030 budget cycle. Initial analysis indicates another $12 billion of growth capital and contributed assets will be added to the city's asset base over the next 10 years, based on already approved projects. This will grow further as the city this will further grow the city's renewal needs beyond its fiscal capacity. Within the report, administration identified a series of subsequent work and analysis that will help us inform decisions required to narrow the fiscal gap. Some of this work is commenced, some is well underway, and other bodies will require a focused effort to complete. Although we should always look outwards to see how we can clarify roles and responsibilities with and funding from other orders of government while growing the non-residential task base, the bodies of work within our control include evaluating all our city-controlled revenue streams, assessing capital requirements and determining the appropriate allocation between growth and renewal, prioritizing our services and adjusting accordingly, reviewing our capital growth and renewal. Oh, I think I said that one, sorry about that. Focusing on divestiture and diligence in acquisition, and reviewing policy requirements that create unsustainable financial pressures. As we advance through our work plan, we will continue to keep council informed ahead of decision-making requests. In earlier presentations, we provided information on the distinction between market value changes and real growth within the property tax process. This table illustrates the magnitude of the tax shift that has taken place since Edmonton's downtown office market decline. As previously discussed, the decline in office values did not impact city revenues, but did result in a redistribution of the tax levy across non-residential assessment classes. Using the 2024 non-residential levy as a baseline, we can see the market fluctuations have resulted in about a $50 million tax distribution away from offices and towards other non-residential property types. This affected how retail and industrial property owners experienced tax increases over the past several years, as much of the office inventory experienced tax decreases. Growth is the other side of the property tax equation and does impact tax revenues. Every year, the city experiences real growth that results in new tax revenue without requiring a tax increase. However, that growth has increasingly come in the form of residential growth. This table shows the cumulative growth of residential, shown in blue, and non-residential, shown in red. While growth does generate new revenue, it also comes with cost pressures as new properties require city services. The servicing cost for residential properties exceeds that of non-residential properties, and while revenue generated increases at about 1/3 of the rate of non-residential. Over time, these growth patterns have decreased the city's non-residential tax base and put greater pressure on the annual tax increases. This table shows the relative decline of the non-residential tax base, both in terms of the revenue it generates and its assessment share, as compared to the overall base, including residential. This table illustrates that today, about 20% of the city's assessed value pays close to 45% of its total tax levy. This slide identifies the distribution of the city's total revenues between residential on the left and non-residential on the right. The city collects about half of its requisition from residential properties and the other half from non-residential properties. However, because the residential assessment base represents 80% of the total assessment, the tax rate is lower. The result is a tax ratio of 1:3, meaning rates are 3 times higher on the non-residential side. The problems of growth are contextualized in the larger regional conversation. As this table shows, the city of Edmonton constitutes close to 72% of the region's population, while holding less than half of the regional non-residential assessment base. In simple terms, population drives costs, and while non-residential assessment generates revenue. Edmonton's population exceeds its non-residential assessment share, but the situation is reversed for the regional municipalities, for many of the regional municipalities surrounding us. With smaller serviceable populations, the region's per capita wealth is illustrated in the far right column. This population to non-residential assessment discrepancy is a primary driver for the difference in Edmonton's tax rates compared to the region. It's worth noting that regional disparity is not limited to Edmonton. Other local urban municipalities face very similar challenges, with the 4 surrounding counties being in an extremely advantageous position. Specifically in the Edmonton region, it is important to note that the levels of service being provided are not comparable. Edmonton provides a variety of complex and high-volume services, such as transit and a host of amenities that citizens from around the region enjoy without necessarily having to pay for the supporting infrastructure like roads, transit, parking, etc., which are covered by Edmonton property taxes. These amenities include facilities like the stadium, Rogers Place, post-secondary institution and cultural facilities like the Jubilee Auditorium, Winsper Center, and Art Gallery of Alberta. I'll now turn it over to Sarah to walk you through the balance of the presentation.
Thank you. Stacy talked about the renewal gap and what are we doing about it. The City of Edmonton was one of the first Canadian cities to recognize the need of a strategic plan to manage infrastructure and has worked assertively to overcome the infrastructure challenge. The city's goal of asset management has always been to build an effective, transparent, data-driven system that connects asset investments with progress towards strategic goals and service level outcomes. Edmonton has been considered a leader in asset management since early 2000s. Nationally and internationally, Edmonton was at the forefront of research, developing tools and processes to create an integrated view of the state and condition of municipal assets. Over the past 25 years, Edmonton has developed various asset management tools and processes. These include a standardized inventory rating and reporting system for comparing asset conditions, annual reports on municipal asset conditions, and risk-based infrastructure management system methodology to forecast long-term infrastructure renewal needs. One of the city's groundbreaking achievements was the unanimous council approval of the Neighborhood Renewal Program in 2009, with a forward-thinking to create a dedicated long-term funding model to ensure the financial sustainability of the program in neighborhoods. Next slide. Municipal assets exist to provide and support services. Without the service, there's no need for the assets. Asset management objectives are guided by the city's strategic plans, level of service objectives, and corporate policies leading to the comprehensive asset management plans. Asset management is the responsibility of all departments, business areas, and people within the City of Edmonton. All are accountable for the health and municipal assets and for making appropriate spending decisions regarding reinvestment in municipal assets. Everything we do in terms of asset management is conducted and guided by the expected outcome of the strategic plans. Through working together as partners across the corporation, we manage municipal infrastructure assets using the pillars of governance, process, people, data, and tools. Next slide. Through the strategic direction provided by Council, asset management activities are performed every day across the organization, with the goal to build, buy, operate, maintain, renew, and ultimately dispose of assets in an effective and financially efficient manner in order to meet the service needs of residents. A municipal asset spends the bulk of its life in the maintenance and operation phases of its life cycle. While the initial capital investment and renewal of an asset is significant, the funding required during the maintain and operate phase is substantially greater over the life of the asset. The operating impacts of capital investment must be a significant consideration when making the decisions in terms of asset management investment. It is important that these functions are integrated and that all of these costs are considered to properly manage our asset portfolios. One of the biggest challenges for the organization is the renewal investment gap, which is the difference between renewal funding needed to optimize the useful lives of our assets and available funding. This slide shows the impact of the projected renewal investment gap on the condition of our infrastructure over a 20-year span. The green line shows the percentage of our infrastructure assets that will be in poor and very poor condition if we fully fund our renewal investment needs. If we are able to maintain an ideal level of investment, the number of assets in poor or very poor condition drops from 10.9% in 2022 to 6.2% in 2042. The blue line shows the percentage of our infrastructure assets that will be in poor or very poor condition based on the forecasted available renewal funding. With the limited renewal funding available, the number of assets in poor or very poor condition is expected to increase from 10.9% in 2022 to 26.3% in 2040. Because funding sources and levels vary from one asset to another, the effects of reduced funding may not be felt equitably across assets. The facilities portfolio has had the biggest challenge as assets have been historically seen the least amount of investment in renewal, thus any reduction in funding levels will be more visible for facilities. This chart in this slide is based on data used to inform the 2023 to 2032 capital investment outlook. The analysis for 2027 to 2036 is underway and is expected to show a similar trend. Next slide. The gap in renewal funding, if allowed to persist, will have a long-term detrimental impact to the asset base, as well as placing a heavy burden on the city's operating budgets, which is often required to stopgap the lack of renewal investment. Another challenge facing the city is the delivery of services while the condition of our asset deteriorates. If we do not reinvest in our asset base, we may no longer be in the same position to offer the services that our residents enjoy or not at the same level. Finally, actions taken today will decide our future. The lack of financial capacity to perform life cycle functions on the assets will have long-term effects on future generations. These challenges are exacerbated by the fact that an important portion of our assets are aging and their condition is also declining. For example, 60% of our facility portfolio is currently in fair condition, with a large number projected to decline into poor condition over the next 10 years. In light of these challenges, actions have and are being taken to address them. These include Council's approval of the dedicated renewal fund and the asset rationalization framework, updating the nonprofit leasing guidelines. Administration has also indicated the capital infrastructure plan program, which will determine what, where, and when to build and renew capital infrastructure in alignment with the city plan and as directed by Council. To support Council in discussion and decision-making related to these and other challenges, administration will be bringing forward an updated infrastructure state and condition report in January of 2026, along with other relevant reports and touch points. The overall purpose of the total cost of ownership project is to enhance the city's financial sustainability. We will do this by integrating the full cost of operating and maintaining our infrastructure into budget planning and decision making, ideally at a much earlier phase than we do today. Why this project matters. Currently, the city lacks a consistent process to accurately capture the full long-term operating costs of new infrastructure. These costs are operating impacts of capital, the money needed to operate, maintain, and program an asset after it's built. The process gap exists for assets we build ourselves, assets we procure, and assets contributed to the city by developers. By creating operating impacts of capitals through a service package, we believe this will have the biggest impact on the short term, especially as it allows us to align this new methodology with the next budget cycle. We are therefore focusing first on capital growth project and contributed assets. Phase 1 will start by focusing on the entire operating impacts of capital process, from the moment a capital project is thought about to the moment a service package is requested to run it. We chose to start with city-built growth assets as we can understand the full process from inception through to build, operate, maintain, renewal, and eventual decommissioning. This long line of sight will hopefully help us develop a process that we can adapt to procured assets as well. Contributed assets are also in scope for the total cost of ownership, but we are aware of other work that is well underway that is being led by Parks and Roads, and we are following this closely. We will have lots to learn from this work and their approach. In the long term, as we move forward, our next steps will be to incorporate total cost considerations across the full asset life cycle, including renewal and decommissioning. In the longer term, we will also ensure a framework is in place for cost calculations. We know that other great work is happening, such as the fiscal impacts of growth and unit cost calculations work within different departments. Importantly, we are working through a one city approach on implementation. Next slide. The model by which the city manages its real estate holdings has evolved over many decades. The city's land management framework adopts an approach to encourage the management of city-owned land as a corporate asset, promoting fairness, consistency, efficiency, and transparency. This framework ensures regular reviews and annual reporting of land assets, reduces historic barriers to repurposing or selling surplus civic use properties, treating city land as a corporate asset instead of a departmental asset, providing decision-making framework that reflects corporate perspectives and considers the competing priorities, and allocates the net proceeds from the sale of surplus property back to council to be made available for priorities in alignment with council's strategic plan. Council has previously reviewed the framework in a series of council reports between 2018 and 2019. Ultimately, our land governance approach optimizes land use in alignment with council direction while balancing council objectives with sales revenues. We'll share more information when we present land management and enterprise land development to you in the new year. Back to Eddie.
Microphone. Sorry.
There we go, first one. That concludes our presentation. We're happy to take any questions you might have at this point.
Thank you very much. There are some questions on the board. I don't know who ended up officially selecting them, so I'm just going to use you selected them, Councillor Rutherford? Then Councillor Rutherford gets to start with questions.
I formally selected them all just as the chair at the
Perfect.
time. I guess I want to start just to clarify something around the slide on the market value redistribution challenge, because it was mentioned about the drop in office values in the downtown and that shift. How does that interplay with the CLR though? And so CLR is the community revitalization levy for downtown, because wouldn't that just affect those pro formas as opposed to, like, locking it into the CLR, I thought was what did the shift, not the actual reduction, because wouldn't that just affect the tax uplift for the CLR and the projections for the CLR?
I'm going to pass this to Kate, who's going to do a better job of explaining this.
Okay, thank you.
It's a great question, Councillor Rutherford. This analysis does not include the CLR. So these are the figures you can see as though the CLR did not exist.
So I think I need to see, so I guess my feedback is before, as we're discussing these kind of strategies and pieces, I want to understand the interplay with the CLRs and this, because I remember the debate about the extension of the downtown one, and that was to me where we shifted the burden to industrial.
And maybe just let me, just to clarify, the numbers on that slide, they are not, anything in the CRL above the baseline is not counted in that calculation.
But can you simplify that response for me? I'm not sure I understand.
I would, the numbers that we took actually, we took into consideration the impact of the CRL. So when we're showing you that $49 million number, that is after having considered anything in the CRL. So that is the redistribution that impacts outside of the CRL, I believe.
That is correct, Stacey.
So it's even
So
more.
Councillor, the CRL in this analysis has no impact. We're removing the CRL from consideration because the redistribution effect of the CRL is its own thing.
Yeah.
So here you would see, as though the CRL did not exist in 2010, that is their distribution of the office versus industrial and retail of the 2024 tax burden.
Yeah, okay, that helps, because there's some office that would be outside of the downtown, I get that. But what I could surmise from your response then, if I'm understanding correctly, is that shift is actually greater if we do factor in the CRL.
it's an analysis that we can perform. Essentially, the effects of the CRL have been to increase the demand for offices within the CRL because they are the AAA office portfolio. So in some ways, the CRL exacerbates the shift. That's not in this analysis, but it can be produced.
Okay, and then one of the things that I've been really struggling with is the operating impacts of capital on developer contributions. So how is that going to be better reflected in our budgeting processes going forward?
So I'll maybe start and then my colleagues can add, but the total cost of ownership project does, so for one, always when we brought you capital investment outlooks and operating investment outlooks, we did factor in some components of that in those analyses, but they didn't always show up in full service packages. So this project is designed to help us understand what those are, to capture them, and to add them to the budget. And then one of the things that we're gonna have to think about when we bring you a budget is, are those the type of things that come right off of the growth revenue, the real growth revenue? So instead of allocating real growth revenue just to the city, we would start to first address operating impacts of capital that come from growth like contributed assets.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette.
Thank you. And I know we're getting a number of presentations, so I'm just wondering if there's a specific focus you want us to stay with on this one topic.
I think anything that was in the slide deck is fair game.
Okay. Then I'd like to go to the residential, non-residential slide with the comparisons, the regional comparisons. And as that's coming up, what I'd like to ask, if we can get it on screen, that'd be great. What I would like to ask is, there are two different ways that we could do this, and so I'd like to get your thoughts on this. One is if we want to change that ratio so that non-res pays less, that means there are two options. One is that we can reduce the amount that non-res pays and, you know, change that ratio between residential and non-residential through our policy. The other is by increasing the number of non-residential properties. And one can be immediate, the other takes time, and there are pros and cons to each, but in our financial situation, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, I'm gonna start and then I'm gonna ask Kate to supplement. So there's like, there's two ways you can change the ratio. You either change the allocation and push some non-res to residential, or you grow the tax base, which we, I think, have indicated to you before, is a thing that we need to do, but it's gonna take a very long time for us to do it. So those are your two tools to do it. Now maybe just pass it to Kate to talk about, like, I don't think you're gonna be able to do either or, you're probably gonna have to do a bit of both.
Of course.
Thank you, Stacey. There is actually a third, which you've gone into in detail, which is reducing expenditures overall. So just reducing the tax rate requirement would also affect the ratio, would also affect the tax rates, which can be applied to one side or the other, which is sort of the second mechanism, shifting the burden to residents from non-residents. We will be going into some of these in more detail on Thursday, so if you're able to attend, that would be fantastic. And I would say that the best course of action for council to consider would be some amount of every one of the tools that are in your purview, because the gap is large, and to make meaningful change would probably require a long-term strategy.
Yeah. Okay. And so I guess the question would be, is there anything stopping us from getting incredibly aggressive in the attraction and competitiveness of the city, you know, in consideration of the region?
I'll maybe pass that to Ms. Petrin.
I think that's what we're doing in terms of how we attract businesses to our city is a combination of things, whether it's, being an affordable city, vibrancy, stable
Sure,
business
but
environment.
just the bottom line financials to attract business, can we go further?
In terms of how we compare
Like
from a tax rate.
For incentivization, for attracting, for retaining, because obviously we are out of step with the region as far as that competitive nature.
And our industrial investment action plan is doing just that in terms of how we market our industrial lands, but also how or what we would look to incentivize. So there's a report coming to council in Q2 of next year as an update to the industrial plan along with incentives.
Okay, and then in context though of our financial situation, is it possible that we can go faster and more intentional?
Yeah, I think it's always council's purview to be able to do all of the above. I think that this landing on what the priorities of council are for the next 4 years is going to be inherently important as we start to build that 4-year budget and how we attack that more aggressively in one portfolio than another. I think that rests with council to decide on how aggressively you want to do that.
And you do have section 364.2 of the Act, which allows you to establish bylaws, and you did one of those last year.
Yep. Year by year is pretty slow.
Thank you. Councillor Wright?
Thank you. Nice reality check to start Monday, start the week off. But I do, just on a sort of a positive note, in light of sort of maybe the dire straits that we're in, our credit rating,
AA+.
and that was just increased this past year.
That's correct.
Awesome. Okay. I'm just sort of looking at the 4 questions that you've got there. You talked about reduction in like grant funding and that, and also our increased population. I'm just wondering, would it be possible to know how much that grant funding is per person? Like over maybe the past 10 years? Just to show what an impact it has. I'm assuming.
Provincial grant funding?
Provincial and federal.
Yeah. I might have it. I don't have it at my fingertips. If I have it, I can circulate it.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. And then when we're talking about the operating impacts of development and that, so you said we're looking, Parks and Roads is looking at what those operational costs are. And I'm just wondering, so that would include things like playgrounds, maintenance of those playgrounds, right? Sarah's nodding. Okay. And then I brought up in last term about the neighborhood entrance signs. Is there anything that we can do to ensure that there's funding for maintenance of those neighborhood entrance signs?
I think when we're looking at total cost of ownership, we're talking about all of those things, all of the above. So what does it take to maintain the city in the state that council is expecting it to be, and what is the inventory that we have in order to maintain that work? So I think we're talking about every piece of that when we talk about total cost of ownership.
Okay, and then but would there be any like ongoing maintenance that the developers would be required to pay into, a reserve of some kind for that maintenance?
Councillor, if there's neighborhood entrance signs on public property, that's a city responsibility, and then alternatively they're located on private property and it becomes the responsibility of the homeowner or sometimes the homeowners association.
Right, yeah, I totally understand that, but is there any responsibility for the developer to fund ongoing operations, maintenance of those items?
I don't believe that there is, and I do believe that is because often it would have been a factor in the pricing of the property at the time of purchase.
Okay. So then I guess it would be up to the property owners or purchasers whether or not they wanted to incur those additional costs. And if not, then the market might have to reduce the price of properties.
So I'm just, maybe to just ground us, it's a very small thing in the context of what we're talking about today. I can't remember if we agree, like what was agreed to in terms of looking at that, but I would say Kim Petrin is like, if you
I don't
own a
think there was-
property and you have one of those, you are obligated to maintain it.
Yeah. Okay.
We do still have some ongoing work, Councillor Wright, about that, and we're just getting an update on that body of work that was initiated after some discussion on this as well. So we do have a path forward. There is some investigation in terms of which ones are city-owned, developer-owned, what is the cost of the maintenance around that. So there is ongoing work there. We just have to get an update on that specific piece of work.
Okay, I know it's just a very small portion, but again, if it's something that we can, cut our operating costs on, why not? I put a note here about something Councillor Paquette asked, and I'm almost out of time. No, okay, can't remember, so that's it.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. Just a few quick clarifications. So, and I apologize, there aren't numbers, but it comes up as slide 18 for me. But this is the bar chart showing the impact on the FSR for the structural budget variances. And I just wanted to confirm, I know the next slide speaks to it, but this projection showing that growing deficit to 2028, that does not account for the tax increases that we approved to help pay that back? That's the one.
This is like a hypothetical indication of what the compounding would be. So I would say like if you don't resolve structural budget variances, you will end up, that includes this, we might add back a slight like tax increases, but if the structural budget variances are still here, you'd still be drawn down. So I would say you would be making no measurable improvement if we increase taxes and we still run structural budget variances.
Great, but again, that yellow piece, I'm not clear why that yellow, what that yellow piece is and why it's growing.
So each year, it's just the yellow piece, each year grows by the blue bar in this particular diagram. So
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, so
so it's sort of outside the consideration for the tax increases.
gotcha. Okay, but again, the strategies that we're dealing with those structural budget issues, we have our other strategy in terms of paying back the FSR. This is just if we're not addressing those. Okay.
Yes, and that would help you pay back that first like $65.4 million. But that strategy won't work if you continue to have structural budget variances in the neighborhood of $50 million each year.
Great. Okay, no, that provides a lot of clarity. Thank you. And then just the slide previous to that, it shows sort of that volatility being the structural budget variances. But I also just wanted to confirm, my understanding is that many of the structural budget variances have been happening for, 10 years, for example, for some of them. So that volatility, it's more that a legacy of structural budget variances meant that we didn't have the resiliency when there were these broader global things happening?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. So there have been structural budget variances that have gone on a number of years. I would also say they've, though, compounded post-pandemic when we had maybe a smaller structural budget variance that we could easily handle with a surplus in another area. As we had a period of persistent inflation and the expenses grew and those were unaddressed, they became larger and harder for us to deal with.
Well, and I think also some of the budget work as well to sort of trim areas where there had been surpluses, right? That also removes some of that.
Yep, that
resilience.
for sure.
Okay. Maybe just finally, and Ms. Petron, I know we're going to be talking about this in 7.5, but we do have an outstanding question about the land use mix in our future growth area. So as we're making those land use decisions, are we modeling that out in terms of what that means for the balance of the assessment mix?
We do have a motion from council to look at the mix of residential versus non-residential in the future growth areas. So there will be a report back on that in terms of the assumptions and how it looks in terms of the overall city plan.
So city plan from a land use perspective, but are we doing the analysis from a taxation and assessment mix?
On the south of, I believe that our assessment and taxation teams are involved in coordinating that work with members of Ms. Petron's team.
Okay, that's great, because I think what would be really useful coming out of that is if we saw, you know, let's say we do future growth area 50-50, we do it 80-20, or we do it 20-80, let's say. What does that mean for our assessment growth, our assessment values when we model that out? Great, well, thank you, thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Thanks. Maybe you'll get into this with 7.3, but I was just curious. I was thinking about the funding, the structural budget variances there, and it felt all very external. Is there any thoughts on our current resources, how we're using them? I think about overtime versus funding proper FTEs and use of consultants, empowering our staff to make decisions instead of consultants all the time. Any insight into that at all?
So for sure, we look at those things. When you see the budget and when you see the capital and operating updates, you will see that there are issues with overtime that we're working to try and address, specifically overtime in fire rescue services and Edmonton Transit. Use of consultants is something that we've been taking a more measured approach to in the years. We do try to use our own people to do work, but it does not always make sense to use a city employee to do certain work, especially if we don't have the relevant skill sets, or if the skill set that we only need for a short period of time. Rather than hiring a full-time employee who becomes a lifetime employee, we hire a consultant to help us to deal with the specialized work if in a defined period of time.
Okay. All right. And I guess I got another question here too. Just I was looking at that office revenue decrease there, and I assume that is because of a lot more work from home. Is that the kind of the idea?
Yeah, I'll pass it over to Kate, but it's one of the things that comes into play in office valuation.
Sure.
That's correct. Alternative work arrangements, the fact that there's a smaller footprint that is needed for an equivalent amount of work over time. Also, what we call a flight to quality has had an impact in Edmonton, much as it has in other major cities where tenants prefer to have high amenity buildings, which leaves our lower quality product more likely to be vacant. All of these are sort of contributing factors. The one thing I would say is that Edmonton's situation is far from unique.
Sure. And so I guess, and I don't know enough about it, so I'm asking you, is that like, is I'm assuming and I'm hoping that people are still working. Is there, when they're working at home or in other alternate arrangements, is that reflected in how that gets taxed? Like, if they're working from home, do we collect?
No,
Yeah, I
there's
understand
no
the question.
other tool, right?
What's that?
Like, the the value of an office tower is linked to its ability to lease that office tower to people working. When people are working from home, and it lowers the demand there isn't another way for the city to capture revenue because a person is working from home.
Okay, thanks.
That's correct. I would add that the difference in the tax ratios, the tax rates for residential and non-residential have a large impact. If people are working from home, they are still paying a residential tax rate and almost sort of taking away that non-residential tax base entirely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Tang.
Great, great presentation, very thorough, as always. just on this question around is there anything we shared today that doesn't align with what you heard during the election? Maybe I'll just put out there, and if there's a presentation coming to address that, let me know. But I think one of the things, I certainly hear quite a bit, and I'm sure I'm not alone, is what is the city doing itself internally to save on costs and that kind of stuff. And I think we see some of that with the budget that was released. I'm thinking even dating back to 2008, for example, there were some very coordinated efforts to cut overheads within the city. I can't remember what the percentage was because I can't find that report. And I think, over time there has been a lot of that. And I can't remember this discussion around public service worker versus residents, that ratio, because I think we're pretty up there, or we're pretty on par with national average, or even leaner than national average. I'm wondering when that presentation is coming, because I think that is that part of this whole picture around these are our gaps, these are what we're doing with our gaps, but what is the city doing internally as well?
So, like you said, we run reduction exercises. It's actually I would describe it as part of our ethos. Every time we bring a budget, we look at what is it that we can be doing differently. It's another thing to start looking at, do you wholesale change the delivery of services to have services delivered in a completely different way? And I think in the coming years, we will get to things like that. Mm-hmm. I don't know, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, and maybe just to add, when we talk about the priority setting of the city, and we talk about council's priority setting objectives, obviously this is a bit of information for you folks to land on what do those priorities look like. But as we land on those priorities, how we set the city up to ensure that we're delivering on those priorities, I think is important. So I think there's an element of work that we can do when we know we've got that strategic direction by council and what that 4-year budget looks like, and setting ourselves up to attain and achieve that. And I agree with you on the levels. We are lean in this organization comparatively to other comparator properties. We've been doing that leaning exercise for probably the last 8 years. So we're seeing the product of that, and you'll see some of that in our ability to compensate for some of this work.
I think my point isn't so much what are we, I think the point is, from the public, we see a lot of these are the things we want to spend money on. This internal exercise that we do on an ongoing basis, just part of the way we do. I don't feel like we emphasize that enough. And I think that ratio, for example, is I can't remember where the presentation went to, but I know we've talked about this. And part of what I'm thinking when we talk about structural deficit, I'm I wonder how much of that has affected the structural deficit, or not deficit, the some of the structural gaps that we're facing. Has it affected it? But obviously we're going to keep going with some of that internal exercise as well. So this is sometimes I think the disconnect between, yes, we want to build a city, these are our priorities, this is how we're going to spend it with the budget. And then you do hear from a lot of residents around, but you can save so much on this and this and this and this, right? So I just feel like that's sort of the final bit I was a little bit missing in this conversation about finances. That's all. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Or are we gonna...
I think what you're maybe looking for is, or what would maybe be helpful and what will come with results-based budgeting is the benchmarking of that. Okay. How do we compare how we process, and I assume internal you mean sort of enabling service delivery, like a department that I lead, as opposed to a operations department like city operations in transit. I think we got to look at it holistically, but results-based budgeting is meant to help us with that. How are you delivering the service? Are you achieving the outcomes? And reporting back on that so that it helps people make those decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think we're a pretty lean corporation as we've grown significantly because our population has grown, the service needs has grown, et cetera. I think I just want to be able to kind of point to some specific stats and whatnot, and if that's going to come in the future, whether it's results-based or orientation, I think that would be really helpful for us to kind of revisit some of that again.
Yeah, it's probably not going to come in orientation, but it will come with some of the results-based budgeting.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jans?
Thank you for this very good presentation. I'm looking at the bar chart slide. I don't see a number on it. Regional disparity per capita. If I can ask the clerk to pull it up, it's very green. There's two numbers that I'm looking for, and I don't know. Maybe I'll ask the mayor if, I don't know if the mayor has this, but the first number I'm looking for is if I look at that bar chart of all the industrial revenue and all the residential revenue, if all of the industrial revenue was pooled together of the 13 communities, and then it was allocated equitably or equally per capita across the region, how much would Edmonton taxes go down? So I'm looking, and same for the others, like, so how much would Sherwood Park, or sorry, St. Albert taxes go down, Devon taxes, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's great to see that, but if that was, if we took a regional approach that all industrial in the region benefits the region, and then was pooled and divided per person, what would that be? So maybe admin could provide that in a memo?
I'm gonna say yes, not knowing that how hard it is to do that exercise, so.
Well, how did you pull that chart together? Like, you added up all the industrial per capita. So I'm just saying, pull it up.
Yeah, but now you're asking us to take this, like, this is per capita, this is assessment per capita, so now you want us to overlay this with the budget, right?
Well, let's start with the easy one. Let's just do the assessment per capita. And if it was like, okay, if this was pooled equitably, the number in Devon going from 160 might go up to 190, or might go down to 130, or whatever it is. That's what I'm looking for here. If we took an equalization approach to the region in terms of industrial tax base, that's
What would our splits look like then?
yeah.
Okay, that's different than
Yeah.
how much would our taxes go down, which is a different question that would require us to overlay
yeah.
the analysis.
And I think we need to get there at some point. I think we need, in this industrial strategy, I think just saying more, I think at some point we need to have a target, and actually, so what is that? Secondly, if there, I see this on the regional disparity. The other chart I'm looking for here is how much are Edmonton taxes artificially higher to subsidize the region, to help taxes stay low in other communities. For example, in the fiscal gap report, we talk about how 1 in 3 cars are on Edmonton roads. We talk about there's no housing and homeless supports in the other communities. The policing problems that are in Edmonton. The other, like, if we added up all of the net things that we are paying the tab for the region, and we distributed that out, would that be Edmonton taxes would be, say, 5 or 10 or 20% lower, and then that's how it would split out. Like, I think this is good, but I think we need to actually have some other targets. And I can't imagine that if I was in Devon looking at this, or Beaumont, or Morinville, or Spruce Grove, or St. Albert, or Stony Plain, I also would be looking at this and saying, I'm not getting my fair share in the region. So is it possible to get more of those, the back analysis to this?
Yeah, let me take that away and just see, like, how long an analysis like that would take to do the overlay that you're talking about on the reduction of taxes.
Yeah.
Or the essentially you're asked, like, the cost of, what is the impact of, like, the 1 in 3 cars coming into the city? We have estimates of that. I don't know that we've translated it all the way down to how much lower would your taxes be?
I guess maybe a simplistic way is, like, here's how much we spend on policing. Given that, there's 12 people in Edmonton, 16 people in the region, take that percentage and apply it to our housing and homelessness spend. Every dollar we put into housing and homelessness, we're essentially picking up the bill for the other 16 people in the region. So, like, I think we just need to cost this out more the same way on our taxes, where, like, here's how much your property taxes are, here's how much your education taxes are, here's how much your policing is, and here's how much the regional subsidy is. And I think we need to clearly articulate this over and over. And this isn't, yeah, I guess to speak to it quickly, this isn't unprecedented. The Alberta government did this in 1994. They looked that some schools were gold-plated up in Grand Prairie because they had industrial revenues, other were not. What did? They pooled education tax revenue across Alberta. They said we need a new deal that treats every student fairly across Alberta. I think we're probably there at the region as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. A ton of good info for us newbies. If I'm hearing you correctly, we got to grow our non-residential tax base, reduce expenses, improve our ratio, just to start. And there's a bunch of things in there, so appreciate that. My question, and I hope it's not a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Let's go back in time here a little bit to year 2007, 2008. The Molson Indy was running. We had the World Cup Junior Soccer. I don't know. Anyways, I pointed out when I look at slides 27 and 28, seemed like we're at a time where we had 72% on non-residential tax base. And then we kind of also found, I guess you could call it a happy medium and a 50-50 split between property tax revenues and non-tax revenues. And I know there's a big economic boom there. We still had increases in 06 of 5%, 07 to 7%, and then 7.5% in 08. But is there any, I wasn't around then, I don't know how many people are around there. Is there any kind of learnings or any sort of insight there where it seemed to be, that seems a point where there are some things sort of diverge, right? Is there anything we can take back if we go back in time?
I'm just trying to think, off the top of my head, I think it has been there isn't any one point I would point to. You pointed to the intersection being 27 or 2007, 2008 on those graphs, but you can see even property tax and non-tax revenues, the decline actually starts before that in 2004, 2005. I think it is it's really the effect of multiple decisions made across multiple councils over time. A desire to keep things like user fees low at the expense of things like property taxes. We've tried to address some of that through things like the fiscal policy for revenue generation to really have honest conversations about who should pay for what and why should they pay for it. But it's been a long-term trend, not a single point of there was a change here.
And my other comment on that is, it's maybe, we're seeing this population boom with not exactly an economic boom to match up with it, right? So some of the realities we're facing.
That's a fair comment.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Rutherford, can you take the chair?
Yeah, I have the chair.
Thank you very much. Just a few questions. One thing I would maybe say, looking at that chart that Councillor Clark was talking about, there was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but because in 2004, I believe, when Mayor Mandel started, that council started down a path of essentially a lot of capital investment, which in turn would have required property taxes to pay for the borrowing costs and all of that. And so that chart, especially as we start to see it go up in 2005, because they were borrowing and there's a borrowing cost, would that have contributed to some of that as an example? Because for many decades up until 2004, the councils of the day were not using debt at all to do most infrastructure.
So yes, obviously when you borrow, that debt servicing payment is going in. It's sometimes funded with tax. It's
correct. Yeah.
We put it on tax supported debt, but I would say we're borrowing for things that are driving service delivery.
That's
so
right.
When you borrow for something like a rec center, we know that most of our rec centers don't raise enough revenue to cover their operations. Right. And now you're also then adding to it the debt servicing that goes alongside that. So I wouldn't just point to debt. I would point to increasing service levels.
And so that was sort of the point because I think that probably had a fairly major role in the beginning of this shift, because we weren't investing in rec centers, we weren't investing in libraries, we weren't investing in roadway renewal, we weren't investing in almost anything. We were almost exclusive, maybe an oversimplification. We were generally using things like pay as you go to fund infrastructure. We were not actually investing in sort of the long-term parts of the city, which really started about 20 years ago. Right or wrong, I think it was a good investment. There was a good audit done in 2018 if folks are interested on capital investments, and it has a good list. But that certainly played a major role in the shifting of the city, I think. Because we have continued that. It didn't just start in 2004 and then end. We have subsequently continued that over successive councils.
That's correct, and I think you obviously provide a different level of service than
Way different.
than you did 20 years ago.
That's right, yeah. So that's just a very fair point. I just thought I'd highlight it's not necessarily the one thing that I think Councillor Clark was referencing, but it certainly was a major shift in how the city did economic policy and borrowing. So the only other question I have, or maybe it's a comment just to sort of piggyback off of Councillor Tang's feedback. So I think, and I sent her a quick note, so I don't think I'm putting words in her mouth, but essentially, I think it stopped in the last budget we had was the 2019 to 2022, where we had about 30 to 40 pages of that budget that were really dedicated towards all of the savings we had found as a city. We called it the budget building blocks. And that was in the 2015 to 2018. I think it was in ones before. It was in 2019 to 2022, but it was not included in the 2023 to 2026 in the same way. You did a report a couple of years ago that talked about some of those ratios, but I don't think we have a place where I can actually go and show Edmontonians all of the great work you have done over the last 15 years, except for one fiscal gap report at Executive Committee that shows all of the savings you have provided and essentially how we've searched every cupboard looking for different things. And so I guess what I feel I'm missing to the question of the feedback is similar to Councillor Tang, how we can better make sure we're showing that. Because I can't even pull up the old 2015 operating budget on the city website anymore to show people those pages of work. So it would be nice to have that, especially in preparation of the next 4-year budget, to be able to show people, here's the work that the City of Edmonton administration has done and city staff have done over the last 15, 20 years. Various savings, various ideas. Is that something you're
Yeah, I have it in memo format.
Yeah.
I can circulate it, but it is different to share something in memo format than it is to share in a publicly consumable form like a meeting like today.
Yeah, being able to tell Edmontonians and have a dedicated space where people can see that work. So anyway, I'm out of my own time, so I'll take the chair back.
Yep, chair returned.
Thank you very much. I don't see anyone else on the board, so I saw that there was a request in the chat to take item 7.3 as the next one. So if I can take a motion to bring that item forward.
Point of order.
Speak to this, but we're not doing.
Point of order.
Yes, point of order has been called.
Can we never got clarity, are we not doing moving of receipt of information?
Correct. So that was ideally the plan going forward, is that if it's an information report, we wouldn't have receipt of information. What hasn't been finalized is how we would still potentially speak to an item that isn't being a receipt of information, or that would be just accepted. So if there is a desire to speak to this before we move on to the next one, even though there isn't a motion on the floor, I'll provide a little flexibility for now before we figure out the right mechanism to do that, or if we should be speaking to things that are just information. So if that's okay, what we'll do is we'll allow people to speak to this even though there's not a motion on the floor right now. Yeah. Well, and if there's subsequence, I would also remember we have a budget conversation coming up too. This is really orientation, so I would also ask people to be very thoughtful about the fact that we have a budget where you can make motions. This is really just an information item that we should be taking. So with that in mind, if there's anyone who wants to provide any initial comments on this, noting that we have a budget item coming up next at 1:30, that would be the place. Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you. Ironically, I thought I would speak to it to save us some time instead of doing a second round, but just wanted to say really briefly, just to the question of, what other pieces of information would be helpful. I know there was a graph that was produced that showed percent tax increase from 2001 to present day, as well as the average inflation over time. I think that's a really helpful visual and a helpful piece of information for new colleagues to be aware of, and also for Edmontonians to be aware of. And I also, one thing that I thought was missing from this report is just highlighting the really excellent work that administration is doing for the non-tax revenue side of things. So our investment strategy, I think, is incredibly solid. And I think highlighting to Edmontonians the value that brings is a great opportunity. But otherwise, again, great report. It could be days long, but really appreciate the information that's been shared.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Hi, thank you, and I appreciate the work that's gone into this orientation. I think a lot of the times people don't actually understand how much it costs to run a city, and so, however, and I think very similar to Councillor Tang's perspective of any type of numbers that can be shared, with council, just to explain like how much it costs to run a city, metrics that compare us to other cities or services. I think that would be fabulous. I wanted to ask, or maybe just wanted to just share, other solutions is like other working groups that who could also shed some light on proposed solutions, like the business community or other organizations that would help us be able to dive into this and look at some of those proposed solutions. So if it, just a suggestion, or maybe it's already being done from an admin side, but any of those talking points that we'll be able to share in terms of what has been done to be able to increase revenue and decrease expenses. I know the work is, it's a lot of work from the administrative side, and so what we can do to be able to echo that work to our residents would be fabulous, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't see anyone else on the board, so we will move over to, I'll take the motion to bring forward 7.3, if somebody's willing to move that.
So moved.
Councillor Tang has moved.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Wright. Please vote to bring forward 7.3 as per the request of Min.
Councillor Principe is yes.
Thank you, Councillor Principe. We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the vote. That is carried. So next up, 7.3, is there changing out?
Can we just take 5 minutes to switch people out?
We can absolutely do that. We'll take a short a regular 5-minute recess. Can't really have a short 5 minutes. until of everyone. So if you can hear my voice in the back, please come back. So lonely.
They're kind of wandering.
I can't even start because I need quorum in order to start, so I can't.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we'll turn our attention to service delivery, the core function of the municipality that touches every resident's life daily. This represents our front line, and we must commit to finding innovative, practical ways to make those vital services more efficient, reliable, and responsive to the needs of Edmontonians. This presentation will frame service delivery not just as a collection of individual tasks, but as a core system intertwined with our city's direction. We will examine the critical role of resident perception in defining service success and how these daily interactions must strategically be aligned with the city's long-term planning goals. Our focus is on the concepts that drive excellent service rather than diving into performance metrics of every single service we offer, recognizing that Council will have ample opportunity to dig deeper into the service levels of specific municipal functions over the course of this term. Service delivery is one of our core focus areas and is inherently linked to the achieving a high quality of life for our residents and operational excellence for our organization. This focus area is critical because we deliver services that directly impacts the core functions of the municipality and the daily experience of every Edmontonian. Supporting excellent service delivery provides benefits to Edmontonians by improving quality of life. Fundamentally, it improves Edmonton's quality of life through reliable, effective, and accessible public services, which is ultimate goal of municipal efforts, and building public trust and confidence. It directly increases public trust by providing high quality service and reliably meets community needs and expectations. When services are delivered effectively and transparently, it increases confidence by demonstrating accountability and effectiveness in our daily operations. For the organization, this focus area will support us in ensuring fiscal responsibility, and it helps us ensure that every tax dollar is used wisely through continuous optimization and processes and reallocation across all departments. It reinforces our mandate. We sustain the long-term viability of services by implementing relevant and effective delivery models, and in doing so, we reinforce the city's mandate to serve the public efficiently, which is the core driver of the municipal organization. Before proceeding, let's briefly reiterate the distinct roles in service delivery. City Council operates from a governance perspective, focuses on the strategic direction and setting mandates. The role of Council is to establish service and performance mandates, establish policy and cost recovery and revenue generation, and provide oversight to ensure effective and sustainable service delivery. Administration takes a direct operational perspective, focusing on implementation and optimization. We must deliver the municipal services that create community value, set service levels with approved budgets, implement cost recovery and revenue generation strategies as directed by policy, and continuously improve efficiency and service outcomes. Working together, council and administration will achieve 4 shared common objectives: deliver efficient and sustainable services that maximize value for residents and businesses, align service levels and budgets to ensure transparency and fiscal responsibility, enhance accountability and performance through continuous improvement, and ensure the service delivers clear community value and contributes positively to quality of life. We currently have 2 outcomes in the delivery focus area. The city delivers efficient, sustainable services, and this focuses on service levels are appropriately established, communicated, and implemented in alignment with the budget. And we generate revenue and recover costs where possible and continuously improve services efficiently to maximize the value. As well, the community receives the service it needs, so every service delivers clear value and a positive impact on Edmontonians. At the heart of this focus area is the governance around service delivery so that we get the most value out of every taxpayer dollar. This builds public trust and guarantees that we can continue to provide services that are important for the long term and make sure that all of our efforts are meaningful and directly improve the quality of life for everyone in the community. I'll now turn it over to Craig to walk through the balance of the presentation.
Okay, we'll just jump into the next slide. This is just it's a busy slide, but it shows the 70 different services that the city delivers that are public facing, that serve Edmontonians and or help manage the corporation. So many of these services provide direct day-to-day support for residents, visitors, and businesses. So we deliver core services that the city must provide because they're legally required or practically necessary, like budget development, payroll, waste collection. But we also deliver discretionary services as well. So those things are where the city has more flexibility in providing. And so an example of that would be the census. There's no legal requirement to provide the census, but and its absence wouldn't fundamentally alter the organization's purpose. So within each of these services, there's multiple sub-services and components, along with hundreds of customer touch points. So today we're talking about the importance for the community to receive the services it needs and for the city to deliver those services efficiently and sustainably. So I provided a couple examples. We're not going to dive into the details of each of those individual services today. The details on key services, those are going to be shared in the branch presentations throughout 2026. So next slide. So speaking on service delivery, a service really is like a system that delivers a distinct, valued, and measurable outputs for Edmontonians. So a good service is the effective and efficient implementation of a process. So at its core, service delivery is about getting the most value out of every tax dollar. It's about building trust with our public and ensures the city can continue to provide services that improve the quality of life for everyone in the community. It aligns with the MGA's purpose, which, quote, to provide services that are necessary or desirable. So service delivery includes both front of house activities and aspects which the public receives directly, as well as back of house aspects. And so these are inputs, processes, and activities necessary to successfully deliver service. We also consider what residents find important, as well as the experience of Edmontonians directly interacting with their service. So services are not only about transactional, they respond to the need of Edmontonians and also achieve outcomes for the community. As a result, the city needs to consistently recalibrate by responding and adapting to changing needs. Go to the next slide. At the city, we're organized by 5 functions, so each covering a specific area of expertise. And so here you see on the slide, there's that imagine, build, maintain, animate, and enable. So while they're categorized this way, there's quite a bit of crossover, and most of our services really touch all departments in their delivery. So behind each service, there's a number of different branches with many responsibilities, activities, processes, and each department understands their core responsibility in relation to the other departments in order to integrate that work and work collaboratively. So it's important to note that no one department really owns the end-to-end of any particular service, and we don't budget based on services, rather by department and branch functions. So flip the next slide. So this is to help animate this concept, and that word was used intentionally, almost like a pun here, because we have animate as a category. So we'll use the city rec facilities and their services they deliver as a cross-functional example. So across the top, those are the department functions from Imagine through to Enable. The service outputs are the customer goals and customer touch points, like a customer wanting the facility to be clean and well maintained as part of that maintain function, to experiencing the programs within that facility, and that'd be a part of that animate function. So for each of these stages, we have internal service inputs that support each touch point. So for example, ensuring the website is updated with the appropriate programming times, and supplying an instructor to deliver, like, say, a fitness program, for example. So because there's multiple stages within a service journey, we have the opportunity to improve the service delivery at many checkpoints. At the same time, it's a balancing act. We got to determine which levers to pull to provide the service as effectively and sustainably as possible, while still delivering clear value and positive impact for Edmontonians. So on the service improvement and innovation perspective, the city encourages a culture of innovation and continuous improvement to improve service delivery to Edmontonians. So for example, we encourage employees to identify and implement new ways of working together and advancing initiatives within and across their business areas. The city's developed partnerships with other organizations. We've demonstrated that municipal governments can be nimble. This can include using new technology and ideas to deliver public services in an efficient and fiscally responsible way. And the city continuously reviews and services and identifies opportunities for improvement. So by focusing on service delivery, we're reinforcing the city's mandate to serve the public efficiently, which is the core delivery of municipal organizations. So I'll just talk through each of the 6 different levers that are on the slide here. The first one being redesigning services and developing new solutions to complex challenges with that human-centered design. That's top right. Engaging in partnerships and relationships to solve challenges and to identify where to capitalize on new opportunities. Improving on existing processes to increase efficiency and effectiveness. Leveraging municipal tools and creative ways to result in better problem solving of complex issues like policy, funding, and grants. And by, of course, using technology to implement new solutions and leveraging open access to data to reveal new insights and enhance evidence-based decision-making. So now looking at service perception. On this slide here, you'll see this. This is the service satisfaction survey that's conducted annually to help Edmontonians better understand the perception of city services. So this survey asks Edmontonians to rate aspects of specific city services, including satisfaction, importance, and preferred level of investment, and overall service delivery. So in terms of perception of overall program and service quality, I'm pleased to say that the satisfaction has been slowly climbing over the past number of years, from 61% in 2023 to its current level of 68%, which is the highest level yet. For the survey, we have taken a look at 20 of the city's main public-facing services and organized them into either areas of strengths or areas of opportunities. And so this was based on their relative satisfaction and importance scores, giving us a clearer picture of where we stand. So I'll just highlight a few primary strengths. These are shown in the dark blue dots in the top right, and are the areas where we've achieved both highest satisfaction and the highest importance to Edmontonians. And so this will include Edmonton Fire Rescue Services, waste collection, and our parks, sports, fields, and green spaces. Our primary opportunities, those are marked in red. These are the areas where Edmontonians have expressed that they are less satisfied, even though they see these services and programs being very important. And so these include spring and summer road maintenance, infrastructure delivery, community safety, public transit, by law enforcement, and homelessness response and support. In addition to the service satisfaction survey, business areas conduct their own surveys to capture more in-depth information about user experience feedback. So now that we've talked a little bit about service satisfaction, I just want to double back on the distinction between core and discretionary service. So we deliver a mix of core services, and those are those legally required or practically necessary items, and discretionary services, which is the ones that the city chooses to provide. So the decision on what services we deliver, which would be core or discretionary, that's a bit of a complicated one, and it isn't as simple as looking at what the city is legally responsible for, but also what the community expects from their city. So I'll flip to service levels next. So as I've mentioned, each of the 5 focus areas have specific outcomes They complement one another. Our focus on service delivery goes in hand with financial sustainability, which is why they were both presented this morning together. So whether the city delivers a core service or a discretionary service, we generally have the ability to deliver a lower service level or a higher service level. So setting clear service levels and consistently monitoring performance, those are really crucial as it directly supports a results-based budgeting approach. This allows the city to measure its effectiveness, identify gaps, and ensure resources are continuously realigned and justified based on their measurable outcomes achieved for the community. So service levels clearly define what residents expect and what the city commits to deliver. Service levels must take into account multiple aspects. So that's the strategic alignment, the budget allocation, assets, risks, and service expectations. So service levels represent a service cost trade-off established in a flexible, rational, and transparent manner. So it's important to keep in mind that there are pressures such as inflation and community expectations, and the goal here really is continuous improvement driven by the concept of value, which is the gap between what is expected and what is actually received for taxes and user fees. So on this slide, you've heard throughout the other presentations, the city is restricted in its revenue generating capacity because of the limited tools available. We work within those constraints and apply city policy, for those keeping score, C624, which is fiscal policy for revenue generation, which provides a framework for allocating service and infrastructure costs throughout the community. When we consider revenues in relation to service delivery, we must adhere to the principles outlined in that policy. And we take into consideration who benefits, who pays, and how do they pay. The policy includes guiding principles, including fairness and equity, clarity and consistency and accountability, and who benefits from the service and who should pay for that service. So before we get into the questions, just wanted to iterate the main point of this session here. So we've covered the foundational context of this critical focus area, outlining its complexities and the strategic outcomes that we're targeting. As we review the roadmap going forward, so today's focus area, we're in the focus area step in the roadmap. Our goal was to provide that necessary overview to provide that detailed work, which will begin next year. In the plan ahead here, you'll be engaging with service levels in detail through a number of different avenues, one of which is council reports, another is department and branch presentations, like I mentioned, coming in March of next year. And that's where we're going to be providing council with an overview of the department and branch budgets, outlining key cost drivers that impact budgets and service levels. And then finally, the 27 to 30 budget deliberations, which should all be grounded in that result-based budgeting. So this process ensures that when we discuss service levels, we do that with a complete understanding of both desired outcome and the resources needed. And so the details on the key services branches deliver will be shared within those branch presentations in 2026. Okay, next slide. This is the similar slide that we've had in the other presentations, and so then we can flip to the last one really, which is, that ends our presentation here.
Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I'll look to the board to see if anyone has questions. I know it was selected by Councillor Rutherford. Do you have questions?
Yes.
Excellent. Go right ahead.
I really appreciate this presentation. I think it's one of the biggest conversations that we have with residents is around expectations, and I think it coincides with the previous presentation in terms of people being like, our property taxes are increasing, but we're not seeing the services increasing. One thing that I've been still really grappling with since last term and this term is how we apply an equity lens to this work. So I do understand, that in general we create a service level, and that's a service level across the city. So if they might be different for a district park versus a pocket park, but at the end of the day, there's a standard. But with city operations, how are we, or are we, at any point considering equity in the distribution of service delivery?
I think we do that through a number of ways. So in general, we look at the inventory, not necessarily So like for snow and ice clearing, we'd look at like the type of road it is or the path. So it's less about the geography than it is like the inventory, I'd say in general, but we do take into consideration things like the social vulnerability index when it comes to say things like sidewalk maintenance. Similarly with our transit network, a lot of those equity considerations are factored into like how we do route planning. So we provide, service hour additions, which is informed by social vulnerability index, like in things like off-peak hours. We have a number of connections with whether it's student alliances or senior organizations, trying to factor in like those unique challenges or aspects of our various customers that we serve. Does that help?
Kind of. I think like definitely can take it offline, and it's a bigger thing. I think that when we talk about the correlation, I do think there's areas like, we'll just focus on transit for a second. I went and visited a lot of seniors residents over the campaign, and a lot of them talked about that the transit service is pretty sparse, and there hasn't been really any improvements that they've seen over the last several years in the area that I represent. So as we've done service adjustments, they haven't seen any improvements, but they've seen proportionately, property taxes going up, and it doesn't really necessarily affect them, but they're still making that causation.
I mean, I'd start by saying we're currently not meeting our minimum service standards for transit, and so there's a number of reasons for that. We've got constraints on our garage capacity. We do have the southeast garage on the way, but in general, the first things we would do is start to look at how do we achieve those service standards, and then from there being like, how do we best apply from an equity lens?
Okay.
And so there's, I'd say, constraints in terms of like, how can we expand our service, just practically right now.
So in the next, I know it's not necessarily for this budget debate in December, but over the next year before the 4-year budget, we're going to actually talk about where there's a gap between what we say our service delivery is and similar to what we did with snow and ice. I thought that was really good. Are we going to do that with other areas?
That's the intent behind, like, that's how I'm going into each of these branch presentations. I'd say the nuanced difference between what you saw with snow and ice in transit would be snow and ice, we had a posted service delivery that we said we were achieving, whereas here with our minimum service standards in transit, we're clearly articulating this is not something that we are achieving right now, but what we are posting is what we are achieving. So in terms of like the routes, the timing, the service delivery that we are delivering is what's being clearly communicated to the public.
And one quick question I have in the last few seconds is, can we get some understanding of the service delivery standards split between res and non-res? Because I do have a lot of industrial areas that I also represent in the ward, and when we're talking about, some of the competitiveness with the region, I think there's something there. So is that something we'll be able to get a better understanding of as well?
Are you like transit related?
Just as you're doing those branch by branch service, will you talk about the service standards for if there's any difference between residential and non-residential?
Yeah, we can take that on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to confirm what I thought I heard, just in terms of our satisfaction levels. Did you say in your speaking notes that it's the highest level yet?
Yes.
Can you say that again? I think that's a really great news, and honestly, I don't know that I was aware of that. How long have we been tracking that?
This is one I'll probably defer to Catherine if she's on the line from Employee Services.
I can jump on. Craig, this is Sarah on that. We've been tracking the survey for the last 4 years.
4 years. Okay. Well, that's exciting news, and I think, seeing the areas of strength, I think, I actually found really precise tracking with what I was hearing on the doorstep. So I think that really demonstrates the accuracy of again, where folks are satisfied and then where that focus is needed. One thing, and I'm not quite sure how we delve into this because it's a big question. But when we look at service delivery, how do we make choices around what we do in-house, what we outsource? For example, I know, for example, our snow clearing is sort of a combination of in-house and outhouse, outsourced. How do we make those decisions, and do we have policies dictating that?
Maybe I'll start and I'll ask somebody to jump in. I think that generally in cities, you try to create a work profile that gives people pensionable time. So when I look at that, you're talking about renewal of vehicles and how you keep your fleets up, or how you're doing maintenance on roads and those kinds of things, and you want to create a job for somebody for 30 years. But the nuance of that is we have surge activities that happen throughout the workplace, and ideally that surge comes with a flexible work arrangement. So for the stuff that you do generally on a day-to-day basis for a long period of time, you'll generally turn towards in-house work to do that work. However, on surge activity, you're definitely looking for flexible arrangements so that you're not spending more than you should as a taxpayer. So, and I'll maybe turn it over to anybody else that wants to just jump in quick. But I mean, that's a basic principle. But we're always going to compare. And then we talk about that nuance, the work that we do every single year in terms of, what does it mean for us to look at efficiencies and what efficiencies we can gain as a city and our taxpayer dollars, and make sure we're spending that appropriately. We do these evaluations of work that we do in-house to understand if that's best suited for there, or if things have changed in a way that we should explore other options.
Great, and my understanding is that that's not only from an operational perspective, but also equipment as well. What's that tipping point between having a plow that doesn't get used?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, waste is a great example of that. We do about 50% contracted services there and 50% in-house. So we definitely look at that usage. Snow and ice is a great example as well.
But again, do we have a formal policy around that?
I'm not aware of a formal policy. What we'll kind of lean towards is what makes the most amount of sense for this particular piece of work. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that's the short answer.
Yeah, well, and I think there's been work in recent years where, some of the seasonal staff that we were hiring, rehiring, we've made those year-round positions, finding space for that. And again, that was sort of towards that efficiency piece. Is that correct? Ensuring that we retain talent, avoid retraining.
Totally. There's a balance of efficiency, cost effectiveness, employee experience, service delivery, all of those aspects, kind of finding that right balance of what makes the most amount of sense. And so just looking at some of the support I'm getting on the chat here, I don't see a formal policy that we follow. However, another thing we do look at is jurisdictional scanning as well. What do other cities do? We share notes quite often to gauge what makes the most amount of sense.
Great. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I think just a really important dynamic in our service delivery and how we approach that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. I'll start with slide 13. I think, in my opinion, a lot of the strengths are sort of the big ticket things that we need to do as a city. So I commend City Admin for that. And I think actually some of the opportunity ones, I don't know if they're solvable, but they're action items that we can take to really solve, to get that in a better spot from a satisfaction perspective. So that's a comment there. Question, and this is pretty timely because we just came from a breakfast with Minister Williams where he mentioned the word core services 25, 30 times in about 5 minutes. So my question is, for these core services, do we know a percentage of that versus the budget? Do we have an estimate on what that is? I think that'd be very helpful for residents to kind of know.
I do. I have it. I don't have it at my fingertips, but I think in past years we've shown how much of the budget is core services versus discretionary. So let me see if I can track that down.
I think that'd be good because then we let people know these are things we have to do, and this is a percentage of the budget. And obviously that leads into the tax question as well, right?
So my team is telling me it's about 70%.
Okay, that's great. Good to know. Another question I have is there been an example of when we've kind of reduced service levels and seen sort of minimal or less significant impact to residents? Has there been an example of that's this has been good, or is that just like wishful thinking?
I think we do that every year. So when we look at service levels, we redirect funding to different programs every year in every budget that we do, and some of it has minimal impacts, some of it has bigger impacts, but all that's done through the budget process, and we definitely have examples of service level decreases that we would put in budgets that have less impact on daily life, and then there's other ones that have great impact on daily life.
Okay, yeah, if you could share with me or get back to just on a couple things we thought were wins or less minimal, that would be good to know. But I know it's subjective, but I'd still like to get your opinion on that. And then next question, how do we go, like, I think this is a really big communication opportunity here, because I think communicating the service expectations we've laid out, and Councilor Rutherford, I think, touched on, the snow clearing, I think, is a great one. People know exactly what to expect, or at least they should know what to expect. How do we plan to kind of move that forward into other areas or something? Because I think that could be, people, they don't, the biggest question is like everybody wants to pay less taxes and still maintain their services or make them better. That's obvious. You're going to hear that in every kind of campaign cycle. But I think if we could do a really good job of actually clearly articulating what the service levels are and hold us accountable to those service levels, to the public, I think that'd be really beneficial.
Yeah, I think our intent through the budget presentations on each of the divisions to show you that level of service and what our policy directive is and how we're maintaining that policy directive, like Craig talked about, on transit, there is a certain service level standard that we're always trying to attain, as opposed to when we look at snow and ice control, that again is a service level that we would definitely lay out, but depending on the snowfall amount, it adjusts based on the snowfall. But I think you'll see a lot of that come to fruition through those branch presentations in terms of what does that service expectation look like and what our delivery mechanism is for that.
I'll give one more example that I think was effective. Is so we worked through snow and ice and clearly articulated what Edmontonians should expect. And the next big program that we went through was turf. And so I think that's another one that we articulated, and we added maps. Everybody loves a map that they can click on, zoom in. When was this cut? When will it be a cut next? And then we found the amount of complaints and inquiries just dropped dramatically, because then you could just go on the map, see where it is. And we did the same thing with snow and ice, where you can have a map, you can literally see where the trucks are. There's a slight delay, but you can see where they are, and then you can get an idea of they are out working. And so we're still working through how do we add maps and automate the turf so you can see where mowers are, kind of getting into those details. But we're going to be doing we are doing that type of work with all of our big programs, so you can see, and just really that management of expectation. And then it becomes if this service level is not adequate, then it's a budget discussion.
Yeah, I think share that. I think it's our jobs. We can help you with that to get that communication out once we have those in place. That's all I got.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jans.
Thank you for this. I'm looking at the page 18, the revenue policy, fiscal policy for revenue generation, who benefits, who pays, how do they pay. I think there's some areas where we have a lot of really, really good specific data, and then there's others where we don't. For example, I look at our roads, in the fiscal gap report, it says that the asset value of our road system is $14 billion. But then I don't, I think how that exactly divides, to my knowledge, we don't have, we don't have a number that says how many parking stalls we have in neighborhoods, for instance.
I'm not sure about that specific example. We would know how many parking stalls we would own. But if you're asking about water to the area, it's we may have that data. We may not have collated all that data.
I'm wondering how, because this is good, but I think going forward, if we agree that there's a certain cost of road infrastructure and we want to right-size that, or whether it's alleyways or whether it's parking spaces or whatever it is, if we know that I think the average cost of a parking stall could be about $863 a year based on the winter sweep and spring sweep and then winter snow removal, etc., then we can now put a price on something and saying, okay, if the cost of a 1,000 stalls is $863,000 a year when we're doing neighborhood renewal or when we're doing something else, what is the carrying cost of adding more parking stalls in a neighborhood? Or at that rate, is it better to put a subsidy into transit-oriented development? I feel like there's some more specific data especially around roads coming forward. Like, I know we've talked about it in parks, like the carrying cost of naturalized spaces versus trees, and just understanding cost recovery on that. So like, what is administration already working on this, or is this something that needs a council funding package or a motion or something? Like, how do we go from there around some of this data analytics?
There's a few things that we've heard loud and clear and are definitely working on. So, not to open another can of worms, but traffic, we get it, we're on it. Parking, we're on it. So this is one that we have a report coming. We have like quite a bit of resources looking at how do we relook at parking, the program, the curbside management. We've partnered with the U of A. We're looking at data to say, like, you know, what are the quantity, everything from residential parking program to the pricing for e-park. All of that is to come in 2026 in terms of like, how do we package this together?
Yeah.
Incorporating all the feedback, and how do we deliver an overhauled program? It's also a program that's going to be, I believe, going to be audited next year as well. So there's certainly a lot of attention on parking.
Like my long-term goal, I love the route report cards for ETS. I can look at the number 9 and the number 4 and see, oh, 30,000 trips took place. But is there a route report card for Twilliger Drive? How many trips came down this road? Or actually the 50th Street interchange? Like, oh, that only did so many trips or something. Like, I think if once we can measure things, then we can decide how we can have some of these service delivery conversations. And so I'd love to get to route report cards for our roads and our parking and it's the largest asset class. Like, it's all of our capital is our roads.
That's actually another good example of adjusting service on so route report cards, incredibly proud of those in transit. That's another thing that we do is performing routes, we reallocate those service hours to more high performing routes to try to like make the system more efficient.
But do we do that with asphalt? And do we do that with, like, I have some people mad about an alley closure, but it might be 1 or 2 trips a week. So that, you know,
the quantity of cars driving over a particular road.
Yeah, is this, and we got into that a bit about the bridge in Mill Creek Ravine and other conversations like this, but I think if we know certain assets need a lot of love, but some may feel like they're overused, but are they overused? What does the data show?
We can take that back. I think there's a lot that goes into the traffic monitoring piece, and kind of what you're saying is like, what's the usage of a street? What does that mean for us? What does that look like across the city? And how does that impact our asset overall? And I think that is a big piece of work. And that traffic, when you talk about traffic operations, that group hasn't grown in 10 years. So when you look at the growth of the city and keeping pace, those are the kind of things that will come back in that conversation at budget time of what our service level looks like versus what are we delivering on the street, that we can dig into things just like that.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see anyone else on the board, and we are at 11:54. So this item is complete. So the plan of action is that tomorrow morning we will begin with item 7.2. We will do 7.5 as the second item of business tomorrow, and 7.3 is scheduled for Wednesday morning, first item of business. Sorry, what did I say? Whatever I said. 7.3, yeah, sorry. Yes, I said 7.3, I meant to say 7.5. Anyway, fine, there we go. The order of operations, 7.2, then 7.5, then 7.4 is what I meant to say. Thank you. So we'll do that. If we somehow finish 7.2 and 7.5, are you prepared to do 7.4 tomorrow? I don't think we'll get there. I think those two will likely take up the entire morning. But
yeah, if we get through them, we could probably do 7.4
okay.
after
Just to potentially have on deck, but I think we should be prepared.
So
therefore, I think what we will do now is this meeting is on recess until tomorrow at 9:30 in the morning. We have a different council meeting that starts at 1:30 this afternoon. Thanks, everyone.